Schools are weird, and I'm going to explain why. So, the concept of people, kids, children, and teenagers getting up early to go to school, sit there hours on end, yes, with little breaks, but come on, sometimes they're not enough. I'm gonna be real. And then they go home, and if they have a long day, they sometimes even have to do homework. And then they're just gonna be completely exhausted and have sometimes not really any free time, and they have to go to bed and then get up again, and everything just repeats. And I come from a country where we did not have middle schools or high schools. We just had kindergarten, primary school, secondary school, and then university. But you needed to do A levels in order to do university. Now, we didn't have colleges. Well, we still don't have colleges. Just didn't like spontaneously start appearing. We don't have them, and I don't think we will ever have them. But it's just so weird because at some point, yes, kids don't mind that much getting up early. Some are just late sleepers. They like to sleep in, sleepyheads. I am one of them. If I could, I would sleep until like 9 a.m. every day. Doesn't matter how early or late I go to bed. I usually sleep until like 9. And for those people getting up early at like 6 a.m. or whatnot to go to school, it's just dreadful for them. And I don't blame some of them for skipping and lying, stay home, because some of these just need that sleep. Because at one point in your life, when you're a teenager or a preteen, your hormones change and you just can't go to bed at like 7 or 8 p.m. You just can't fall asleep, and that's normal. So obviously they're gonna stay up later until like, I don't know, 11 or midnight. And then when they have to get up at like 6 a.m., some just might not be very well rested, and that is completely fair, and they're allowed to not be rested. They're allowed to stay up late, even if their parents are strict and say, no, you have to go to bed, you need the sleep. Yes, they need the sleep, but they just can't. And I hate when parents become like really vulgar or whatnot and like complain on social media like TikTok and be like, my child doesn't want to go to bed. He's always on his phone or their phone or her phone. We don't know. And like always on that computer, like they're not getting enough sleep, they don't do their homework. They're so tired in the morning, they don't want to go to school. Yes, but they just simply can't go to bed. I've been there. It's been years, but I've been there. And sometimes I still stay up late and I have to get up at 5 a.m. 3 times a week. But sometimes I still do because sometimes I just can't go to bed earlier. Like I try to leave my PC by like latest 11 p.m. And usually I try to be in bed or asleep way before, not way before, but before midnight. So I have at least these 5 hours because if I have less than 5 hours, I can't function. And there has been times, even now when I'm working, that if I get not enough sleep, aka 4 hours or less, I I'm not gonna go to work. I'm gonna stay home, let my workplace know that I'm not gonna come in, and like call out my GP and be like, hey, I need like an excuse slip for day. I just could not sleep the whole night. and I don't work in my town. If I would work where I live, maybe I would go to work. But because my way to work and from work home are like both roughly 1 hour, I would just not function at one point. If I had to get up at 5 a.m. and go through a whole day of working and go home, I would be home by 5 p.m. It's 12 hours. 12 hours on 4 hours of sleep, that's just not doable for me. As I said, I like to sleep in, and I know I can't really compare my situation to students because I mean, I can only compare to my school time when I was a student. I had to get up at 7 a.m., leave the house by 7:45, go to the bus stop, take my bus. School would start at 8:20. School would end at 3:30. I would be home by 4 p.m. and that would be my day. And usually I wouldn't really have homework. Yes, when I did my A levels, I did, and they took some time, but like they were manageable. And my school had a rule, especially for the people, for the students who were younger who did not do A levels, so grade 5 to grade 10, you were not allowed to give homework when you were in the last 2 hours of the school day, and the class was the next day as well. If you had your class before lunch break and then give homework, and the next day has this class as well, you are allowed to because they have the opportunity to do their homework in lunch break. We had a specific classroom you could go to with teachers that would help you if you needed help. So that was allowed. And even then, homework shouldn't really have taken longer than 10 minutes. If it would have taken longer than 10 minutes, you didn't have to do all of it. You could have just done what you could do and say, I already set 15, 20 minutes on that, or 10 minutes, or whatnot. I couldn't do the rest of it in time. And the teacher can't really say anything against it because they're supposed to make sure you're able to do that in a certain time frame. And yeah, also, what thing we had, you were only allowed to have 3 exams a week and 1 exam a day. And when I hear of like American students from the US who say they have like 2 exams a day, I will never understand. This is gonna maybe make like start a little feud, but American US high school exams can't be that hard. From what I heard, yes, it's probably just a stereotype, but like multiple choice is just not difficult. It's really not comparable to most European countries, I feel like. Like in Germany, I'm just gonna use English as an example because it's just our first language, well, second language, first foreign language, and for obviously like England, like English people and Aussies and US Americans and Canadians and stuff, that is at some point probably their first language, their mother tongue. That's easiest to compare, I think. And usually, what we have for English is either the first task is a listening comprehension or a reading comprehension. Usually, the listening comprehension is like you can hear twice, and then that's usually kind of multiple choice, and then you have a few sentences you have to fill out and state if they're right or wrong. And like you have some questions like, what is Sophie doing in the evening? And then you just have to say what Sophie's doing in the evening. And stuff like that, right? It's never too difficult. Yes, you have background noises. We have on my school, I don't know if other schools have that as well. But my school has differentiation. I can't pronounce that word. We have two different classes. We have the just I'm just gonna call them default, the normal ones, the basics, and then you have ones for advanced. You can have an advanced class in maths, in English, chemistry, and in German. And they're different. The listening comprehensions. I mean, all of the things you learn are different. The advanced classes have slightly more difficult, more advanced tasks, and for example, the listening comprehension in the advanced class, you have background noise as if you would be at the King's Cross on London Underground. You have people in the background, you have bad platform speakers, you have trains coming in, you have just a difficulty that is not there for the ones who have the basic course. Now, it's not in a way to like diminish people, like students. It's mostly there to, if you're not good at English or that good at English, or if you have certain like hardships with certain things, they're not gonna throw you into the advanced class where you would just sink and drown. It's there to help you. And in the advanced one where I was in, it's there to just help you out to just in the case you are in England or in the US or in any other country and there is something, an announcement in English, that you're still able to understand with those background noises. It's just there to help you. And obviously to, just have a little bit of competition if you have competitive students in your class. And yeah, then usually would have a vocabulary part where it's just, I don't know, it's been so long since I was in secondary. If I remember correctly, sometimes it might just be tenses. I tutor my neighbor and he's in 8th grade now and he's in the basic course for English. And he just always had problems with the English tenses. Simple present, simple past, past progressive, present progressive, will future, go future, conditional one, conditional two, all of these. He has problems with them, and I'm trying my best to help him. But, like, it's just, if you just don't sit on it, if you don't use English, whether it just be passively by listening to it, if you're not watching, if you're not engaging, it's gonna be difficult to learn, I feel like. Now, I didn't get fluent in English when we had the tenses. That was so many years ago. I was still able to learn them. I don't know why. I never studied at home, never studied for exams, but I was still good in those exams. I mean, there was like basically a flip in the switch. At one point, I just I just had A's. And that was kind of around the time I got fluent in English. Now, I would assume I got fluent in English kind of around 2017. I was able to speak it quite well, but that was the time. I mean, there was probably a little bit before that. I can't really pinpoint exactly. I know that I watched PewDiePie in like 2014, and obviously he does English videos. And I don't know how much I understood and how active I was engaging in international English media. I just know that by 2017 I was fluent. And you could see that in my grades. And like it helps if you're not fluent, if it's not your first language, listening to podcasts, watching videos or streams or playing games even, it helps because you see the vocabulary, you hear the vocabulary, you hear the tenses, you just hear the grammar, and at one point it will just click. and you will understand and you will use it for yourself. And it's just interesting. I just completely went into the wrong direction. The last part in an English exam usually is writing. Usually it's an email to a friend. Just an email to a friend usually. Most of the time it's a pen pal, like in England or in the US, and then you just have to write usually about what you did in the classes. And yeah, it's just you have a certain amount of words you should hit, and then you're good to go. If you don't hit them, you get minus points because you didn't hit the required word amount. But if you go above it, you don't get bonus points. Then you just wrote more. And like that compared to A levels, as in English major classes, is also vastly different. Because I'm an English major as well. I majored in English and art in 2021. Like last year, June last year, I believe. I had my final graduation exam in English in, I believe, May 2021. And before I go into that, I want to go onto how the English exams in English major class are built. I think they might be similar to normal basic English in A levels, but obviously I can't know because I didn't take the basic English. That was my major. I had 5 classes of English a week. That's just because you also obviously have different classes you have to take because I did I'm just gonna call them the overall A levels. They are like specified A levels you can also take where you only have classes for a specific area of knowledge you want to learn. Some people can take an A levels in office stuff and then you just have office related classes. But because I did the like overall A levels, I had English, maths, politics, history, PE, German, and whatnot. I also biology. I just had mainly all classes that was just there. So there's just an overall knowledge I can get, right? So if I go into the big and open wide world, I'm not gonna look at like clouds and think, do they just spawn in? No, I won't. I know how clouds form and how they behave. And yeah, in art, it was weird because I had art major, which means because I had art major, maths was also in my graduation and I hated it. I'm not good at maths. And art is also really weird. I've had people ask me how can you grade someone's art exams? And it's quite easy, but I was gonna talk about English. For English you have first a reading comprehension usually. You don't really have listening comprehensions anymore. And it's usually in a way of like a summary. So you get usually very long text. I also say usually a lot. You just get a long text. Might just be an article on, I don't fucking know, townhouses in America. And then the first task is a summary. And teachers are very careful on if you actually write a summary or if you retell it because you get minus points. You're supposed to write a summary, not not repeat, right? The second task is an analysis. It's always an analysis. You have to analyze everything you see and read. You have to analyze, is it a tabloid? Is it a broadsheet? Is it like what are the rhetoric devices, stylistic devices? Are there rhetoric questions, hyperboles, alliterations, all of that? You have to find them, realize them, mention them, analyze them, give examples, and say what usage they have. Right? If it's a rhetoric question, like, are clouds made of water? Obviously, yes, they are. It's usually I don't want to like I don't want to pretend I'm doing an English exam, but to people who don't use this, it's there usually to like make the reader scoff a little, be like, yes, of course. It's a form of making them engage in what you write. Obviously, the first part of like anything, an article or something, is there to catch your attention. So there's usually always a stylistic device in the introduction of something, whether it be a very interesting sentence like third prime minister this year, and then you're like, third prime minister in England? What? And then you are like engaged. You want to know more, so you start reading, and then you have to like keep this interest, and that's done by stylistic devices, and that's a whole big thing. And then sometimes, if you, for example, have a speech that you have to analyze, like some people had in my class, I didn't because I skipped this exam because I wrote a thesis paper in English, like 11 to 13 pages long. I don't remember how long it was. They had to analyze a speech by Malcolm X, I believe. And yes, there are stylistic devices, but also, in a way, manipulation. You have to realize how he, in a way, manipulates his audience. If he says brothers and sisters, it's a feeling of unity. Yes, I'm your brother, I'm your sister, I belong to you. Not belong to you. That sounds just like Malcolm X owns you. But like we are belong in the same group, right? In the same community, and then you feel like, oh, this is my interest. I gotta talk to them, not talk to them. I gotta listen to them. I gotta engage with them, and there's so much they can purposely leave out negative details and only focus on the positive things. That's just cherry picking. It's just manipulation, and you have to figure everything out in your second task. That's also usually the part that gives you the most points. And then the third task is either an A or B. You can always choose, unless your teacher just didn't focus on the other thing and wants you to write one. But usually it's A or B. And most of the time, A is a like letter to the editor, um, or comment or something, where you have only your own opinion. And I love to do these things because in letter to the editors, I'm always passive aggressive because you're not allowed to bash the person you're talking to because they're the editor, they're not the author. Meaning you can trash talk the author to the letter to the editor in the letter to the editor. You can just say, oh, that was trash opinion. You can be colloquial in letters to the editor. Also in emails to friends. If they're emails to a co-worker or a higher up, obviously you can't. You have to be sophisticated. You have to make sure you don't use slang and all these things. And yeah, B usually is, what was it? A written discussion sometimes. It's more of a creative thing. Sometimes it's also just a diary entry. So, one thing, we once had an exam about Romeo and Juliet, and because our topic was Shakespeare, and it was part of where Romeo spends the night in Juliet's room, and then the morning is awake, and the morning is awake. Yeah, the morning comes. They are all both awake, and one of the maids, I believe, wants to enter Juliet's room, and like Romeo has to like escape through the balcony, and then it's like the end. And in that exam, I kind of failed that one. Not fail, you can't fail. I just threw it kind of. You obviously had to analyze every single person in that scene. So if it was just Romeo and Juliet, you only had to analyze those two. If it was Romeo, Juliet, Lady Montague, and the maid, you had to analyze all four. You have to, because they're there, unless the task says only analyze these people. And our creative writing kind of task was write a diary entry as Juliet. And what I like to do is write in an oldish kind of English, or try to. And when we just had normal classes in preparation of this exam, I always wrote my homework when I was kind of creative writing in that kind of English, not in Shakespearean English, which is technically Elizabethan English, but. And I would read it, and my teacher was like kind of impressed. And for one time, she said, when giving us a creative writing homework, to either write it in normal English or go all out and do it like me, because you're not gonna get a better grade or worse grade depending what you do. It's just for fun. And I also read the balcony scene once, both roles, Romeo and Juliet. That was interesting. Yeah, that's just how English exams are structured. Sometimes, rarely, there's a fourth task, but I don't think that really has happened. Don't think so. But yeah, task one is just a summary. It shouldn't be too short though. Task two is an analysis. Usually, my teacher was like, the longer the better, but it's not always the longer the better. I'm just gonna say that. And task three is creative writing, or a comment, or an email, or written discussion, just something to refer back to the text. And I am going to now say what I did for my graduation exam. So I had it obviously a written exam because it was my major, and we could choose between 3 or 4 different exams. That's normal. And the exams were the same for the whole state. So everyone in my state who had English as their major had the exact same exams to choose from at the exact same time on the exact same day, just to make sure no one, like, not one school writes it on a Monday and has the completely the same exams as people who write on a Wednesday, and the people who wrote on Monday can literally tell them what was going on. And the first option was an article by a US journalist about townhouses in America. I think in the article was something, I don't really know if it was an article, I think so. He was very emotional about it as well. I think he grew up in a townhouse and then later on really got against townhouses and was like, they're dumb, they take away space that we could use, you could utilize more, and that stuff. I didn't really read through the whole exam because I didn't really understand what the fuck he wanted from me. The second one was a poem. Now we knew there was gonna be a poem, and we also knew one of the topics will be Nigeria. Sadly, the poem was combined with Nigeria. Not because Nigeria isn't a good topic, I would have chosen Nigeria if it wouldn't have been a topic, not a topic, a poem. Because poems themselves are quite easy to analyze, in my opinion, because there comes the artistic side in me. You can read into poems a lot. and you can explain them, and as long as you give good explanations, teachers can't really say no, this is wrong, because it's just how you interpret it. I wasn't very good in Nigeria when we had it, but I still knew quite a lot. If it would have been something about Nigerian politics, we had for a quite long time how women are treated. I think I would have chosen that, but it didn't happen. It was a really not weird. It was a confusing poem, so I didn't choose it. The other one I didn't know. I don't remember if we had a fourth one, but if we did, I just don't remember it at all. And the one I chose was actually about Black Lives Matter. It was about the tipping of the Edward Colston statue in Bristol. Now, when Black Lives Matter was going on, I had it on my timeline on Twitter, obviously everywhere, and I actually saw a video of said tipping of the Edward Colston statue and when they threw it into the harbour. So when I read it, I read Bristol and I read through it and it clicked and I was like, this is my exam. This is the one I'm taking. And that was the perfect choice. I wrote an A minus or B plus. I did really well, and that's just because it was a topic I knew about and in a way was passionate about. Plus I really like Bristol. And again, I just saw a video of it, so I was like, I have amazing background knowledge on this. I can't just not take this. So it was an article about what happened, that the Edward Colston statue was tipped and thrown into the harbor, and then obviously you had to write a summary, you had to analyze it. And then the third task actually was not directly about this article, but there was an article by, I don't know if it was fictional, but it was an article by a US journalist saying something roughly around the lines of, if we silence journalists that criticize these tippings of statues, that is a restriction on freedom of speech. And you had to give your own opinion on this. And obviously, I went no by silencing and criticizing and whatnot, like people who go against slave owners, slave traders of the past, you're silencing them. Because what I argue, like I wrote as like an argument, by having these statues up and people knowing that, I'm just going to use Edward Colston as an example, was a slave trader and owner. People who know that and are white might look at him and in a way feel they have a right to be racist. And they're like, this person has a statue in my city. Surely it can't be this bad if I say the N-word or if I be discriminative against you, because there's a literal statue of this person right in front of my face. And in a way, it may make people of color just feel like they're worthless because this is a statue of someone who just traded, who owned, and it's disgusting to say that, who owned the ancestors. So, like, it's like you're not silencing people who want equality. You're just being a fucking douche. I got heated in my exam as well. And I think one of the reasons why my exam was this good was because with argumenting in that to the journalist, to the US journalist, the state or the other school, I don't know exactly who graded my exam, realized I knew what I was thinking about, and I knew, and well, they knew, I knew, and I had prior knowledge. So that's great. Not that it happened. I mean, you know what I mean. it's great that my exam was good, and it's great that Black Lives Matter happens, and the Edward Colston statue is, I think, still in the water. And when I actually visited Bristol this year, um, I was with a friend who was born and raised in Bristol, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember um my exam, and I wrote about the Edward Colston statue that was in Bristol. And I always assumed the statue was like right next to the water. It wasn't. Um, there's something in Bristol called water steps, I think. Water steps or wet steps or something along the lines, which is basically kind of where the statue was tipped into the water. And there's also Poseidon statue, and like it's a long place, long. I don't really know how to explain it. And we were walking alongside. We were like, I would say, 100 meters away from the water. And my friend was like, oh yeah, like the statue was like right here. And I looked at it, and it looked like something where a statue would have gone on it. I just assumed it was a piece of art in a way. And was like, this is where the statue was. And was like, yeah, it was like proper tipped and carried by like multiple, I don't know how many people to the water. And was like, I did not know that it was such, in a way, a long way for it to be moved. It was very interesting to like see in real life. Also about like what I saw on Twitter and not being from the country and what I wrote my graduation exam on. So yeah, I originally talked about schools and then I switched to English as an like example of how exams are here. That's not really what my intention was, but I hope it was okay and I hope you guys understand a little bit. There was no real like red like line through it at all, but like maybe the next one will. Maybe I'm gonna talk about art exams if that's something that's interesting. Or if not, just say something that is interesting. If I have enough knowledge, I will talk about it.